The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, good morning. Welcome in. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Off and rolling here on a Wednesday. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and Casey McAllister off and rolling here this evening. What the hell, this morning. My apologies. But Casey, yeah, I know, whatever. Casey,
we pre-recorded today?
If it was an option, we would. But Casey, how are you? I can't tell if you're doing well or not. I know we don't talk a lot of kickball on the show, but big kickball news out of FC Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm okay. There was some big news, though. FC, they traded away Acosta finally to Dallas FC, another MLS team. Didn't think it would get to that point, but this drama with him has gone on long enough, and there's multiple reasons why he wanted out, and the reasons kept changing, and he was just done with Cincinnati. It feels very Carson-esque is what people are saying. It was like he went from being like the Messiah like Burrow to being like Carson, and that's unfortunate. But FC turns around and gets another MVP-type caliber player in Evander, and that solidifies the midfield. And I think FC's ready to roll now. I think they've got the roster construction figured out up to this point, and now they just need to get in sync. Need to get together and start practicing together. When you add an MVP level caliber player to your team, that's always going to be a good thing. So I can't complain too much. I'm going to miss him, but I'm also not going to miss him because he was an ass this whole offseason. So
Championship soon?
Championship soon. Yes, they will compete for a championship.
That's not what I asked. Championship soon?
They play in Cincinnati, so I don't like their chances.
But you can just say yes.
Yes.
Like it's so easy to just say yes. We do it with the Reds and the Bengals. We know they're not going to win.
Yeah, it's true.
But good for Dallas. Dallas is where all the biggest stars in sports go, and Dallas needed a winner right about now after watching Luka or letting Luka just kind of walk out the door. But Elliot, I'm sure we probably stole one of your headlines right there, right off the bat. I mean, great start to the show. But how are we? How are we today, Elliot?
I'm sure we didn't.
I don't think that one was in. But yeah, good for them. Good for them. I'm okay. I would say I'm okay. I wouldn't say I'm great, but I'm okay. We're fighting. We're at Wednesday. We made it halfway through the week. So we finished today, and then you're on the home stretch.
That's right.
That's what it's about.
Round and third and heading for home.
That's right, baby. It snowed yesterday. I told Jacob it was going to snow. I got my prediction right.
Yeah, I wasn't happy about that.
Yeah, luckily this snow didn't really count.
No.
I mean, this was like a little dusting.
Moved my alarm up a little bit just in case. I was going to have to do some shoveling this morning. Luckily, did not have to.
Did not have to.
Jacob, how are we? How are you?
I'm all right. You know, wish it was warmer. It was warm for a couple weeks there. Got up to about the 50s, and now it's cold again, and that stinks. But other than that, it's all right.
How about our guy Casey calling someone an ass so early into the show?
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. Gets the juices flowing.
I mean, I'm jacked. I'm ready to run through a wall right now. So I'm ready to go. All right, let's see. Show lineup for today. We're going to talk a little Reds coming up around the corner. Gordon Whitmire put out something about Spencer Steer that has everyone already in that midseason feel, already concerned about the health of this roster. We'll talk about that coming up here shortly as well. We'll talk a little Bearcats coming up with Scott Springer from Bearcats Beat. He's going to join us about a half hour, just under a half hour from now. We'll chat with him. Elliot, are you buying back in? The old Bearcats, man. You said if they took care of business that you'd be buying back in. Are you buying back in?
No, but I'll tell you what, I'm close. I'm gonna watch every game now. Like
That's good.
I wasn't gonna watch the rest of the games, is where I was. So now I'm gonna watch the rest of the games. Yeah. So Scott Springer of the Enquirer, he's gonna come on. I don't know what time that is, 10:30. So we'll get to talk some Bearcats and see if the dodgeball has really helped the squad. I guess it has.
Well, good. We have that coming up here around the corner. We'll take a look at the AFC North. What are the biggest question marks out of the AFC North? The biggest question mark for each team. We'll take a look at those, and then that's today's show. So let's get it rolling. Let's send it to Elliot. We got Elliot's headlines.
Oh.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
I was gonna say, I
That's
thought you were.
right.
I thought that's where you were
Well,
going.
we did that last night.
Okay, that's fair. College basketball, as we talked about just a second ago, the Bearcats did win against Utah. Congratulations to the Bearcats. They win their third in a row. I believe that's the first time in conference play, but I could be wrong. I don't know if they did it last year. I have to go back and check, and obviously I didn't do that. 85-75 the win last night. Jizzle scoring 25 points, 6 assists. Aziz adding a double-double. Gabe Matson, the former Bearcat, he came to town and dropped 28 points. But up next, Iowa State, number 10, on the road Saturday for the Bearcats. Not a must-win, but it sure seems like if they win it, they're on the right path to making the tournament. Certainly all the metrics and data love the Bearcats for some reason, so this would only help that.
Not a must-win, but if they lose it, that would make Houston a must-win?
See, I go back and forth. I'll talk about it with Scott, but I think you can. There's a chance if you could win 2 games in the tournament, you can win out with the exception of those 2 games.
Gotcha.
At least that's where my brain's at right now.
I was just going to say, if losing this one makes Houston a must-win, this one I think becomes a must-win.
I agree. I agree. Miami, Ohio, they beat Toledo for the first time in 22 games, 92-80 the final, as Cam Kraft, former Xavier Musketeer, dropped 40 points on 9 three-pointers. Absolutely unbelievable. The first time in 22 games. I don't even know how that's possible. It seems like that seems like a Xavier versus UC crosstown shootout type of stat. 22 games it took. But nonetheless, they get the dub, and Miami is going to hopefully maybe get to the tournament this year. They seem to be one of the best teams in the MAC. I would argue the best. You could throw me one of the – I forget if it's Akron or Kent State that's playing well this year.
The last I checked, Akron was at the top as of last week with Miami right behind him, Toledo at third. I think all the top 5 teams in the MAC are all Ohio teams, and it's Akron, Miami of Ohio, Toledo, but maybe Miami jumped up. I haven't checked the refresh standings, but yeah, they're definitely one of the top.
Still Akron first, Miami, Ohio second, Toledo third, Ohio fourth. So
Yep.
Very nice.
Yep. Number 2, Alabama. They dropped 103 on Texas. Jacob, it is the 6th time they've dropped 100 points in conference play?
that's correct. Yeah, a little bit crazy.
Yikes.
They're the only Division I team to score 100 points on 60, 55, 90 shooting on the road in the last 15 seasons. So they're playing at an unbelievable level, making shots from all 3 levels and really turning it on. That was a game I was really worried about, going to Austin with number 1 Auburn on Saturday at home. Recipe for a trap game, but obviously wasn't the case. This team is really, really good. The issue is they give the other team the ball about every other possession. They turn the ball over at least 10 times a game, and if they can cut that down, I think they can win a championship, but that's certainly a concern right now.
8th-ranked Texas A&M, they took care of Georgia 69-53. The Hoosiers, they beat Michigan State at Michigan State 71-67. Down goes number 11. And Tom Izzo's quest to be the number 1 in wins in Big Ten history has to wait at least one more game.
Mike Woodson resigning from Indiana at the end of the year. Brad Stevens, IU coach.
Maybe. I would doubt
We
it.
open the door again?
I don't think we open that door again. I think leading the Boston Celtics to another NBA title would
I would
imagine
say
be
so.
a little bit bigger for him. But I could be wrong. 17th ranked Kansas, they take care of Colorado 71-59. It was the first time Hurley ever won in Omaha, 70-66. The final, down goes Creighton UConn with a massive win to help their tournament resume. Kansas State, they stay hot. They take down number 13 Arizona. A lot of upsets last night. And we have Kentucky. They beat Tennessee again, this time 75-64. Almanor and Owe each scored 13 points to help them seal the deal. How about that? Kentucky beating Tennessee twice this season. Moving on to the NBA. NBA, the Bulls were down 71-29 at halftime. 71-29 at halftime. They went on to lose that game 132-92 to the Pistons. Yikes. Brandon Ingram and the Raptors, they're in agreement to an $120 million extension. They beat the Sixers last night 106-103. And Kevin Durant, he became the 8th player in NBA history to reach 30,000 points in the Suns' loss to the Grizzlies. Those are your headlines.
I don't know if it's something that happened over the weekend as well. Hubie Brown, 91 years old. He called his final NBA game. And I thought it was interesting. For one, 91 years old, calling his final NBA game. Unfortunately, that got overshadowed because he did it on Super Bowl Sunday. But how about this stat? I thought this was absolutely insane. So he's 91 years old. And imagine, this guy. So he's coached. He has either coached or called games for over 80% of the players in NBA history. Every single player that has stepped foot on the floor in the NBA, he has called a game or coached for or against 80% of the players in the league. That's how long Hubie Brown has been associated with
crazy.
The NBA. I thought that was wild. That's a wild stat, if you ask me.
that is a wild stat. 80%. I wonder how many players total have played in the NBA.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a pretty high number. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. Yeah, he's great. Before this run of his retirement tour, when obviously they were saying everything about him, I only knew him as an announcer. I didn't know he won 2 Coach of the Years, ABA championships. So yeah, he certainly a legend of the game, one of the more famous NBA announcers for sure, and definitely gonna miss him.
You guys mentioned a little bit ago about the MAC with Miami of Ohio. So Jake, you took a look at it. Obviously, Akron sitting at the top. Akron's won like 12 straight. They blow the door
in conference play.
Yeah, they've blown the doors off everybody. They actually played Miami of Ohio about 2 months ago, and they blew the doors off Miami of Ohio 102-75. And Miami of Ohio is one of the best teams right now. So, I think Akron's a team to look out for when we get to the bracket time of season, to keep an eye on them if they come out. But Akron or Miami of Ohio would probably be the two favorites to come out of that. Hopefully they're seeded to face each other in the title game and not before. But either way. All right, let's step away for a few moments. We're going to have a guest coming up here just around the corner. We're going to talk a little Bearcats basketball again, or basketball, whatever we have coming up for you with Scott Springer, and then we'll get to some AFC North talk and some other fun stuff. So we'll step away for a few. You mentioned the Dan Hurley. You mentioned that score a little bit ago. Dan Hurley, his antics again. We're going to take a look at that when we come back. More off the bench next. Off the bench, we're back. Justin Kenner, Elliot Ring, Jacob Tissick, Casey McAllister here on a Wednesday. Where do we have a Dan Hurley? Like, are his antics annoying to you? Do you like it?
Yeah, I absolutely love him. I mean, if I was rooting for another team in the Big East, I'd probably hate him. But, as a non-UConn fan, as a anyone that plays UConn very often fan, I love Dan Hurley.
I also don't think that attitude works if you're a bad coach.
That's fair.
If you're like a middle-of-the-road coach that has never won a championship, it's absurd. You can't act like that. But if you win back-to-back national championships, to be quite honest, you deserve to act however you want to act. I think it's a little annoying, but to be quite honest, I can't argue with the success. So you have to just roll with the punches on this one and just take it.
I like coaches with a little personality, and I'd say he definitely checks that box. But
I would say so.
He's kind of crazy. But so last night after they beat Creighton, Obviously everywhere he goes because of his antics. And look, they've won back-to-back national championships, and they're not as good this year as they've been in years past, but they're everybody's Super Bowl, if you will. They're getting everybody's best shot. So fans are showing up and they're loud and they're giving him crap, the team crap, all this. So last night after they win, a bunch of Creighton fans lined up along the tunnel just to let him have it as he walks off the floor. But here's how Dan Hurley responded to those fans. Take a look.
Two rings,
Baldy.
That's the football.
I love the Baldy.
He's psycho. So for one, I love it. They're just talking all that smack. He's pointing at his hand saying two rings, and then ends it with, while he's bald himself, Baldy. And he got the final word, mic drop. He didn't have to swear. He didn't have to curse. Just kept saying 2 rings, called someone bald as he's bald, walking off the court. I guess like Elliot said, you could do that when you're a good coach. And like Hurley said, 2-time champion. So
Yeah,
there's that.
right.
I think it's absolutely ludicrous. But again,
Baldy. Baldy.
when you're calling opposing fans baldy, it's just absolute nonsense. But good for him. He's able to win a big game, and UConn's going to make the tournament again. And I don't think they're going to win the championship, but who knows? Maybe they could. Tremendous value if you want to bet on it. It's like plus 4,000 to go bet on UConn to win this year. But man, those antics would grow old so tired if he started losing games. Could you imagine what my opinion would be if I was a UConn fan and that guy just started losing? Now, again, I'll never experience that because my teams don't win anything. But if I did even have like just a little bit of that kind of energy in Wes Miller and Wes was doing that kind of stuff and we would just lose every year, I'd be so sad. I'd just be so sad.
And remember, he almost got the Kentucky job, or I won't say almost, but he was one of the big names that Kentucky fans were hoping that they would have landed.
Yeah.
It's one thing, like, he could do that, I guess, as UConn's coach, and he could do it wherever, especially if you're winning championships. But what if he's doing that for Kentucky? How do you think the Kentucky faithful would respond to that? I mean, obviously, if he's their coach, they'd be accepting of it. But if he's doing that while they're losing, I'm just like, he could do that with UConn because he's But I wonder how that would go over if he was leading a program like Kentucky or a big name like that.
UConn's won a lot over the last, however many years. I think they're certainly entered into that blue blood conversation. This doesn't fly to traditional blue blood.
No.
Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina. Like, I don't think this works at a traditional blue blood. I think it works at UConn, but I mean, I guess they are certainly working their way there. But yeah, I don't think this works at one of those big brand schools. Yeah,
Coach K wasn't out calling people baldy. In fact, he was scolding players if they ever took a shot too late in the game.
Yeah.
So it was. Listen. It works. He's won back-to-back national titles. He's earned it. He can act however they want, and UConn's going to love him. Everywhere else, that attitude sucks.
Fair enough. Jake, you had something about Burrow, correct?
Yeah, Joe Burrow's on Pardon My Take, released today, recorded during Super Bowl week after his media tour that we talked about, some of those appearances. He went on Pardon My Take, recorded it during Super Bowl week, and he had a quote to say about, you guessed it, paying star players.
Oh, yeah.
Cap's going up.
You understand the cap.
I mean, not really, kind of.
Because we don't think that it exists.
Way more than we do.
Yeah.
Well, definitely some teams seem to make it feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints have just pretended it doesn't exist for a while now.
And the Eagles are paying everybody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that seems like the way, whatever they're doing.
I feel like
Cap's going up.
Just whatever they're doing. I think that's a pretty good way to think about it because the whole time we talked about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for the initial part of their contract, it was, well, no one pays 2 number 1 wide receivers. You can't do this. So we're going to, enjoy these couple years and then let them go their separate ways. But now we've seen a team that not only paid 2 number 1 wide receivers, but paid them top of the market value and won a Super Bowl with it. So that argument has certainly gone out the window. And I think, Joe Burrow, among with the rest of the city, has recognized that. There's really no excuse anymore. And as he said, the cap's not real. So who cares about the numbers?
So I keep seeing this, like, and by the way, like, yes, everyone keeps pointing at the Eagles, and the Bengals need to do what the Eagles do, and the Bengals need to do what, like, and you guys know this because we've done this show for quite some time now, and we know how the Bengals operate. I think there's a difference in what the Bengals should do and then having an opinion based on how the Bengals operate. Yeah. I see James Rapine going off on a lot of people on social media saying that, those who he can't believe that anyone could think that the Bengals can't get it done. But I do think at times the Bengals can't get it done because, for one, the way they operate, 2, they don't have the resources that other NFL teams have. And they seem to be behind the 8 ball on how they operate a lot of times. So when Burrow even says that, I'm like, yes, I get it. Oh yeah, maybe that's the way that you should do things. Absolutely, that's a separate argument. That's the way that you should do things. And that's what he's trying to push and put that pressure on them to change how they do things. But like, I think a lot of opinions sometimes that people are calling people crazy for, saying that the Bengals can't pay T and can't pay everyone. It's not that they, that they're not, that they can't, but maybe it's just that they're not capable of it. Like, yes, you're allowed to pay these guys, multiple big contracts, but are they capable of it? I think that seems to be the constant hang up in the debate about all of this that everyone seems to be having online. Like, yes, keep T, you pay Trey, you pay Jamar, you pay Burrow, you pay everybody, everyone that's good, especially that you draft, you pay and keep. It just seems like the Bengals. Also, keep in mind too, when people say, I saw that James Rapine and others kept bringing up next year's cap, that they have the cap space to do it. When you sign a guy to a contract, sometimes it's not just about how it impacts you for that upcoming season, it's how it's going to impact you on the back end. And I think a lot of times the Bengals are preparing not just for this upcoming season, but how are these contracts going to impact you on the back end or 2 or 3 years from now? And I think people forget about that sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's the concern. It really isn't about next year. It's about 3-4 years down the line when Joe Burrow's big cap hit aligns with a lot of these other guys' big cap hits. But the issue only comes into play if the Bengals organize contracts like they have the entire time they've been around. If they organize contracts like teams organize contracts in the modern NFL, then it's completely doable. So I think that's the holdup: is do we give the Bengals? It's not an out, but do we give the Bengals an out and say it's a lot harder than it is because of the way they operate, or do we just expect them to change, how they operate to match the rest of the NFL and to match the rest of the teams that win? And I think that's important.
Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Again, we're waiting. Do we have confirmation yet that he's on?
He's not on yet.
He's not on yet? Okay. All right. Well, we'll step away for a few moments. We'll get that situated. We'll get our guest on and ready to rock, and we'll talk a little Bearcat basketball when we come back. Again, Scott Springer going to hang out with us when we come back. Justin Kenner, Elliot Ring, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister in the producer chair, off and rolling. This is Off the Bench. Bearcats get another big win last night. Look, obviously people – what?
I was just saying – no, I was saying they did. I was saying they did.
I thought you said they didn't. I'm like, wait, what? I thought they did.
They did.
But,
they did.
But no, look, this team seemed down and out for a bit. I mean, it seemed like they had hit rock bottom. We talked about it yesterday. You had, Kilpatrick and some other former players, being very vocal on social media about, the state of the program. And, Wes Miller's seat was boiling hot, or at least it felt like it, not even just a week, 2 weeks ago. Now with these 3 big wins and all of a sudden the offense coming alive, and as Elliot's going to joke about, it all started with dodgeball. I don't know what's changed. I don't know what switch was flipped, but whatever the message was, whatever got through to them, maybe it took hitting rock bottom for them to kind of wake up a bit. Either way, this is the right time of year to be playing your best basketball, and hopefully there's enough time for them to play themselves back into the bubble or whatever, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts on that. But where are you at with the Bearcats getting another big win last night? We joked earlier, you're not yet buying in, but you're close.
Yeah, listen, they lost 63-50 to West Virginia. I was at the game. It was the worst game probably of the season, and that's coming after the fact that they lost to Kansas, I think, like 52-40. Scored 40 points in a Division I college basketball game. When they lost to West Virginia, I think that there was a switch that was flipped, and I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's the players wanting to play well. I really don't know, but clearly something happened after that game to where Wes Miller and the Bearcats just wanted to turn it on, and congratulations to them because they've done that. And it looks absolutely phenomenal. Whatever the style of basketball they're playing, and really I think it just comes down to making shots. If you can make shots, then all your problems are solved. Up until, what was that, UCF on last Wednesday, a week ago today, they hadn't done that. And now 3 straight performances, they have been able to do that. So I'm honored here to bring on Scott Springer. We're talking Bearcat basketball of the Enquirer, Cincinnati.com. Check him out. Scott Springer does a phenomenal job with the Bearcats. Scott, first question, how the heck are you, buddy?
I'm good. I got my driveway shoveled, so my wife will stay off
go.
my butt when she gets home from work, and all is well.
There we go. All right, I'm going to ask you this. This is a 2-part question. This is a Big J journalist question here. 3 straight wins. 3 straight wins, 3 straight 80-point scoring performances. Should it be mandated that whenever anybody is struggling in life, at any point in their life, they should be required to go out and play dodgeball? And then what is it that the Bearcats have exactly found in themselves if it's not dodgeball? Because Wes says it's not dodgeball, but I think it's dodgeball.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
That's right.
That's bottom line. I mean, he said he didn't want to talk about the gimmick too much, but heck, to be honest with you, I knew about it the night before. I hang with Terry Nelson a little bit, and I heard about that they did it. So I could have put that out beforehand, but here was my hesitation there. Okay, if I put out, hey, the Bearcats played dodgeball before they played UCF, and then they get spanked by UCF, it's like then Wes Miller's all over me. And that happens sometimes anyway, and that's just the way it goes. But you're just hesitant to put those things out and just have it fired back at you. I'm all about making my job easier. So I did a little video, and I said they lighten things up in practice. I knew it was dodgeball. I don't know that dodgeball is the answer, but right now I'm with you. I'm thinking dodgeball might be the universal thing that we need here in this country. But what his explanation was, what it did was, the guys thought they were going to be punished. They marched them down to that practice gym, the dungeon, so to speak, and they thought they were going to be running and all sorts of things. And then they got out of dodgeball, and then the staff and the players played, and they just had fun. And then his thing was they just fell back into being loose and competing and just being a kid again, rather than feeling all the weight of, oh my God, everyone picked you guys in the top 20 and you're in the cellar here of the Big 12. So some of that's worked. Digital James has turned it on. I know his dad texts him frequently, so I don't know if it's that. I know my kids don't always respond to my text, but Jizzle's hitting shots. Simple as that. Day-Day's hitting shots. It did not work in that West Virginia game, which was the first game those two started. But since then, those guys are averaging, if you combine their stats, they're well over 30 points and double-digit assists between them in the past 3 games. And if you score 80, UC has this magical stat. They score 80, they win. They're 9-0 this season. 80 and above.
I think that there was added pressure once there started to be so much hype on this team, and there was probably more hype on this roster coming into this season than there's been in a long time, at least 6 years or so. So I think once you get ranked and you're like, all right, let's beat Villanova. We can beat Villanova on the road. We'll stay ranked. And then you don't do that, right? Then you play a couple games, Dayton, you play Xavier. It's like, all right, we're good again. And then you get to conference play, and it kind of you get woken up a little bit. And I think that's kind of what happened. I think they got rattled right from the jump. But is this the team right now that we were supposed to see? Is this the team that, like, when we talked about the excitement for the Bearcats coming into this year, is this what we're seeing right now?
In a 3-game sample, yes. Now, is this going to continue? Because you're going into a buzzstorm here at Iowa State on Friday. Those guys are really, really good, get after it on defense. But I know I was talking to some UCF people in Orlando, and so they were all pretty hyped up about that game. They were on the last 4 in or first 4 out, or I don't know, whatever Lenardi had them in. But, the folks in Orlando were all hyped up about that game. And I think they all assumed that they were just going to walk over the Bearcats by, 7-10 points, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was anything but that. And they were surprised. And I was talking to the same guys afterward, and I said, well, first off, I've been around long enough. Nothing surprises me in college basketball. I've seen a lot of weird, quirky finishes to seasons and games. But I said, this is the team that we saw in the non-conference for the most part. This was a team that was playing up and down and having a lot of fun. And I have not seen this team in a while. Even you go back to the Xavier and the Dayton wins, you're squeaking those out, in the 60s. But this team here, they're rolling up and down and playing faster, and it seems to be working right now. And defensively, that on average they've been holding teams to like 64, but heck, if you're scoring 80, you don't need to hold them to 64.
I'm a gambler, Scott. I don't know if you know that about me. It's a problem. It's probably a problem.
Well,
but
you're in this industry, so you are a major gambler.
That's right. So and I when I gamble, it's like I go by the big metric of I'm due to win. Eventually, the Bearcats were going to be due to make shots, and I think that's what happened with Jizzle. So many performances, excluding these past 3, that he was like 0 for 11, 1 for 12, 1 for 13, and his shots weren't going in. When he makes shots, the Bearcats look like a completely different basketball team. And I think if you came in, again, I keep going back to the beginning of the year, because again, I was just so excited, and so was this entire fan base, and you're starting to see that spark get lit again. But it was 1A Jizzle and probably 1B Dan Skillings. Dan Skillings opposed the complete opposite of Jizzle James. Jizzle James has taken over the team, and it looks like Dan Skillings has taken about 15 steps backwards. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, in the last 2, let's be honest. I'm sure he doesn't like not starting,
Correct,
because he was a starter. I have seen snippets in the last 2 games where it's like he looks around and, hey, everyone else is having fun. I'm going to get in on the act. And then you see the old Dan Skillings. Like early in the game last night, Dan was getting after it on the offensive boards, and he is a heck of a rebounder when he wants to be.
Yeah.
But this season, I think he's, two rebounds below his average. He's got the extreme arm length and all that, and he jumps well, and he can get after it. And that's why Wes Miller recruited him years ago. He's told the story. He saw this 17-year-old kid in an AAU game and just rebounding like there was no other, and that's why they got him. And last night he seemed like he was happy. Josh Reed had a crazy game and has played wonderful the last 2 or 3 games, and he was happy for Josh Reed. And so maybe he's going to buy into this team concept of coming off the bench and being the 6th guy. That's not a bad thing. If you go back in UC history, they've had some tremendous 6 men. This team they're going to play Saturday, their top scorer, Curtis Jones, comes off the bench and averages about 18. So in college basketball, you can come off the bench and be successful. So whatever works should be your mantra. And, what Dan's going through, I don't know. I'm not young anymore. You might have noticed. But if you gave me money like some of these guys have gotten, who knows what we would have done? See you later, out of the country. You mentioned you're a gambler. Who knows? You could be off in Vegas with the Vegas Vacation and Chevy Chase and his family and winning 4 cars or losing 4 cars. But when you're that age, I don't know. But the thing I was trying to, and I had to write something that was somewhat negative. I just was proving a point. I said, how could so many people be wrong? The whole world predicted this team top 20, top 25.
Yeah.
How can all of these experts be wrong when they do basketball for a living? And my thing was, maybe they're just not hungry right now because, and I'm not necessarily putting fault on them because they're young, but you give a young person all this money and they've not had this before, and then you get content. And content will get you knocked over every time. You want to get kicked square in the nuts? Be content. Be status quo. You got to keep climbing. And maybe that message has gotten into the Bearcats in the last handful of games.
I don't like asking reporters to speculate, but I'm going to ask you to speculate. If you were to speculate, would you say that Dan Skillings would be a Bearcat next season?
That's a tough one because I know Dan and Wes Miller very, very tight. Very tight. Communicate non-basketball communications quite a bit. I don't know. He's going to have offers, and he certainly did have offers. A lot of the Bearcats had offers. I think that's going to be between him and Wes. If you want to throw a wild card in there, he's got a girlfriend at UC. So does she travel with him? I don't know. So maybe that's the clincher. But my thing all along was when they were in this slump and all these guys saying, well, I'm only going to do one more year and I'll be in the league. It's like, you ain't going to the league playing like that, dude. There's not an NBA player on that roster.
That's kind of what I was alluding to, and I hate to put you in that position, but he said he wanted to go pro, and he was going to go pro. This was going to be his last year. He was going to go pro, but clearly that can't be – I mean, no disrespect to him, but that just can't be the case after this season. Nobody's going to watch the tape on Dan Skillings in 2025 and say, please, let's go get him to the Lakers. That's just not going to happen. So that's what my concern was asking you that question. I know it was unfair. But moving on, I'll move on to Josh Reed. You mentioned Josh Reed. I think Josh Reed reminds me of a classic Mick Cronin player. He just, whenever he comes in, he's going to fight. He's going to give you hard minutes, and he's going to earn everything that he gets. Is he the, like, if there was, like, I don't want to use the word mascot or leader, what would you classify as, what does Josh Reed mean to the Bearcats right now?
He's not necessarily a vocal guy, but you're right. He comes in, and the first things first, he's going to play tough defense.
Yeah.
Now, he tried his best on Gabe Matson last night, and everybody did. I don't know who could guard Gabe Matson. Maybe an octopus, the way he was shooting there late in the game. I mean, at one time, Aziz switched out on him, and I said, well, heck, as long as he doesn't jump early, he might block something, because Matson was just throwing him in left and right. And Wes even said, man, I wish I had the chance to coach Gabe Matson. But Josh, I think he's gotten a lot more confident. He sank 3 straight triples in the first half. That's his career high. He's done it a few times, made 3. But he's back-to-back had some of the better games. I mean, last night was a career high. The game before, Wes said that was Josh Reed's best game. So, we're in the Josh Reed era right now, I guess. I mean, but it used to be, let's be honest, if number 10 came in before, probably fans would go, why is he in? Why'd they take that guy out? And then now you're seeing why he's in. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And I think what they needed was an attitude adjustment on, we're going to play the guys that are going to give the effort and want to be there. And even Rayvon Griffith in small spurts will come in and just he cannot wait to get to the gym and be there on that floor and be a UC Bearcat. So he's only playing a little bit, but you need that energy. And if everyone else plays with that energy, they have a chance.
The last guy I wanted to talk about, Aziz. I've been very critical of Aziz, and I think it's a fair criticism. He doesn't really have a post move. He doesn't really have a post move. I don't think he was playing phenomenal defense. I don't think he could dribble all that well. Like he seemed like an offensive liability. Now he's been improving on free throws. Free throws have been great for him this season, so I want to credit him for that. But it does feel like outside of these past 3 games that he was just lost. I mean, he might have been the worst center in the Big 12. Now it seems like he's coming on a little bit. Was there any part to that injury? I know Wes said that he woke up, I think it was before the Utah game, I believe, the first Utah game, and he's like, he can't walk. And now it seems like he's able to play a little bit better. He's getting more rebounds, double-double last night. Was the injury, could you blame the injury for how Aziz was playing this year or no?
It could be. I know he's had back issues. He had them last year. And, you and I don't know what it's like to be 7 foot, so I don't know what it's like to get out of a bed that's made for a 6-foot guy when you're 7 foot. To your point, he needs better post moves. But he looks better in the last handful of games, and he certainly went after the boards last night. And as a team, that was a big improvement because out in Utah, it was 41-23. They get out-rebounded. And then last night, I think it was 41-29. It was 24-12 at halftime. Yeah. Aziz a double-double. If he's going to give you 10 points and 10 rebounds, you're going to win a lot of games.
100%. And I don't root against the guy. It's so frustrating to watch it sometimes. You see Dylan Mitchell having to play the 5, and it's like.
Well, what's frustrating is, and he just needs better post moves. And to be fair, he's probably not played the game as long as some of the guys, given where he's from. You had Victor Larkin last year who actually had some post moves and is tearing up the ACC. Now, I don't know what happened there. And at the end of the year, he wasn't playing and he was distraught. So I don't know the inner workings of roster management or what happened there with Vic. But, Jamel Reynolds, he had some post moves. He's having a pretty good season at USF. But, guys up and leave. If they don't get their way, they're not getting the minutes. They up and leave, and that's the world we're in. And so right now, I think Arrington Page has potential. I think he needs to get stronger with the ball. He's still young. And then Aziz, if you can come up with something other than the lob, then you're onto something. He is every now and then, finding a way to get a shot in. So, 7 foot is a great equalizer, or not equalizer, but a great factor to have.
Oh yeah. Now I'm going to switch over to Wes. I try to be as kind as I can to Wes. The fan base is on him constantly. My comparison to him was Travis Steele, and I want you to let me know if that's a fair comparison. He brings in elite talent to this program. He has the past several years. He's gotten the whole fan base excited. The games, if you go to Fifth Third Arena, it's an absolutely electric atmosphere. In 25 years of life, I've never seen an atmosphere more electric than I experienced on Saturday against BYU when they started making shots. And it's like, this is so much fun. But it seems like there's a disconnect when it comes to, I don't know if it's in-game coaching, if it's game plan, offensive game plan, but that's kind of where I lose it. But do you think right now that Wes, and no one was under the illusion that he would get fired, there's far too much money on the line. Mick Cronin, it took 5 years for him to get into the tournament. But saying that, is the frustration of Wes Miller this season warranted or no, not really?
A few games ago, I can understand it, and I think he could understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been around the game for a while. But to your point, the money, it's just, first off, if you hear John Cunningham talk, it's not happening. He's fully supportive.
Yep.
And then if you look at the contract, you go, wow, that's probably not in the budget, so to speak. Although the money gets better here July 1st when they become full revenue partners in the Big 12. So there's a lot of money to be had there, but some of that, $20 million of that has to go to the athletes. So just financially, he wasn't going to get fired. And I think, when you got a guy that's bringing in good players, you got to hang with him. And on Twitter, it's everybody wants to fire everybody on Twitter. One game doesn't go your way, fire him, and So I'm of age enough that I got fired from a radio job when I was young. I got fired from a radio job when I was middle-aged. And neither one of those days were good days. And I didn't really deserve it. And that stuff just eats at you. So I'm really hesitant to call for somebody's head. But, yeah, could he have done better? Maybe were they looking at things? I don't know. But I think what he's done to correct it, and he's got Roy Williams to call, and let's give our man Hugs a little credit. He walked in.
Oh yeah.
And it's not just dodgeball, but the great Messiah Bob Huggins did walk into UCF to the locker room and talk to the guys before that game, and maybe it was a little bit of that, but that guy he can make you play just giving you a sour look. So a lot of things have transpired here recently. Enjoy this ride, but you have to know here it's college basketball, NCAA basketball, and February and March, it's the highs and lows, and you can have your heart broken on one shot.
I was going to say, and right now it's like you talk about Wes. If Wes, what a turnaround it would be if Wes were to win. I'm not going to say win out, but win 5 of the next 7 games here, and you put the Bearcats in position to be in position. That's all we've asked for, and I think right now they're playing the best basketball of the season. They look phenomenal. Outside of just a couple guys, Seamoss is frustrating me, but Seamoss found himself at the end of last season. So there's always that room for the Bearcats to flip that switch on. My last question for you, and thank you very much, Scott Springer, the Enquirer, Cincinnati.com, S Springer Sports on Twitter. My last question, what's our magic number? What do we have to do to get into the tournament? My number's 5 of 7, and then probably have to win at least one conference tournament game. But 5 of 7. If we lose to Iowa and Houston on the road, I think we'll be excused if we win the rest of them.
I would agree. I said, 10-10 in that league has to get you into the tournament. There's no excuse otherwise, because it's a crazy league. Is it as good this year as it was last year? Maybe not. SEC certainly having a great run right now, but the Big 12's beating one another up. And, each team's played 20 conference games this year. None of the coaches like it. They want to drop back to 18. So, you don't want to cannibalize your own teams. So, yeah, I would agree. If you can get 5, I was looking at what the whoever this Bart Torvik guy is, another magician that sits in the basement and comes up with numbers, but he's got them winning 3 more, so that might not cut it. That might be an NIT resume, but there again, you go to the Big 12 tournament and you have a chance, but you look, the SEC is going to get a ton of bids. The Big 12 is going to get a ton of bids. You just have to be one of those teams in the Big 12 that's going to have a chance. Because I think the NIT is would be a disappointment. Honestly, it's better than not playing, but everything's right in front of them. They got all these quad 1 wins are right there. Iowa State's a quad 1, West Virginia would be a quad 1, and then I think Baylor at home would be another one, and Houston, obviously. I mean, Houston is a flipping buzzsaw going into that place.
It's scary.
I was telling my wife watching them the other night, that arena only seats 7,000. It's take the lower bowl basically of Fifth Third, and that's kind of what for Tita Center. I always want to say, I'm careful when I say Fertitta because you can mispronounce that and people would call in. But yeah, it's a crazy place, and they are crazy good defensively, just like this Iowa State team is. So Iowa State and Houston juggernauts. I mean, the same Utah team that you saw last night, they only scored 37 points in Houston.
There was a guy at ESPN, and he's been writing, and like you said, he's a magician with these numbers. Before the UCF game, before this 3-game win streak, I think he said the Bearcats, and this was with a straight face, he said they had like a 66% chance to make the tournament before this 3-game. I don't know where these guys, they love the metrics, whoever the metrics are, whatever they're calculating, they love the Cincinnati Bearcats, and I think it's breaking Las Vegas's brain when they're trying to come up with spreads. What a cover last night, by the way, insane cover. But it's like I don't understand what the Bearcats are, and I watch every single game. I'm so confused, so I can't imagine what these numbers are like if they're not watching the game actually and just looking at the box score. But it's crazy. I'm hoping the Bearcats are going to be able to do it. If you had to say, this is the last question. If you were a betting man, would you bet on the Bearcats to make the tournament right now?
Right now, I'm not sold yet. I'm very close to pulling my wallet out, but I'm not sold yet.
Win on Saturday, and we're in. I'll just say it right now. You win on Saturday, we're in.
Oh yeah, if you win on Saturday, you really turn some heads, and all those mathematicians, man, they'll be out with their calculators and all sorts of things. I've got a son that's actually an actuary, which is high level math, and I'm the classic C math student from Manderson High School, and so I don't know where he gets it. All I know, I watch games and I just watch trends and upsides and things like that. I'm not calculating figures, but those that do love them for whatever reason.
Scott Springer of the Enquirer, you can check him out, Cincinnati.com, S Springer Sports on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Thank you very much, Scott. Have a good day, man. Thank you very much. Go Bearcats. Go Bearcats.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
See ya. ESPN 1410. We are late for a break. ESPN 1410, Wing AM, Chatterbox Sports, Off the Bench. We'll be right back with you.
Thank you to Scott Springer again with the Inquirer for giving the show some time here today. Scott's good. I like him.
Love Scott.
Yeah.
Bearcats, obviously, I'm glad that we're talking about them in a positive light because, man, I don't think Elliott could have handled another Cincinnati team disappointing him and letting him down. Now, again, we've seen this. We watched the Reds who, got in a hole early and then were toying with your emotions when they started to get hot at a certain point, and then they let you down. The Bengals just got, it was a horrible start, little uglier in the middle, and then they get hot, toy with your emotions, finish above 500, miss the playoffs, and let you down. The Bearcats started out poor. Now they're getting hot, toying with your emotions. Are they going to continue the Cincinnati trend, in your opinion, and let you down when it's all said and done? How are we feeling after that interview?
Probably. I mean, I it's hard for me to sit here and be confident, but they've won 3 in a row. They're 5-8 in the conference. Like Scott said, I mean, 10-10 in the Big 12 gets you in the tournament. It just should. From where they were, and not at the beginning of the year because they were fine at the beginning of the year against the worst teams you can ever think of. No disrespect to Alabama A&M or wherever the hell they were playing earlier on. This is when you get into real basketball, I think there's like a shell shock, which is why I do think it matters so much to have a good non-con. Because if your non-con's what we had at the beginning of this year, you're just not going to be ready for basketball. The Xavier game, I go back to that Xavier game all the time. The Bearcats played terribly in that game. Absolutely terribly, and they somehow won it. I don't know how. They were losing the whole way, and it came down to about the last, it was like, I think it was the under 7 is when they took control. But even then, it's like the under 4, if Fremantle makes a shot at the buzzer, I bet Xavier wins that game. And they've played ugly since. The Dayton game, you controlled the whole game up until the last 10 minutes and choked it all away down the stretch. They've had good moments, but they haven't been complete. The past 3 games, they've played complete complementary basketball. Everybody's getting involved. Everybody's been helping out. Jizzle James was a disappearing act the first, 6 games of this conference schedule. Gone. You couldn't trust him to make a shot. Dan Skillings, you still can't really trust him to make a shot, but he can have other purposes off the bench. You're seeing a different team right now, and I do believe 5 of 7, as long as you don't lose in the first round to, I don't know who they would play. I mean, in the conference tournament, if they were to do it exactly what I said, they would probably play UCF or Oklahoma State or Arizona State. They'd play somebody bad that you should win. As long as you would make the tournament and win that game, I don't see a way that you keep the Bearcats out. You have a win over Xavier, who's a borderline tournament team. You have a win against UCF, borderline tournament team. So they're doing enough right now. They're beating who they should beat at this very moment. You got Iowa State on Saturday, and I don't think anybody in the world predicts the UC Bearcats to win that game on the road. Nobody. So if you take care of business in that one, you win that game, that changes the whole dynamic of the season. But that's just my opinion. I think you're seeing the best of the Bearcats. I asked Scott, is this the team that you saw or that we all thought we would see this year? And I think this is. I don't think you can get much better. The only difference is Dan Skillings is a bench player right now. Mm-hmm. That's the only difference. And even then, I would argue that's more than fine. Dede Thomas has come in when you play the 2 guards at the same time. They look phenomenal. If Aziz can just contribute just a little bit, the Bearcats are going to win basketball games down the stretch. And it would be massive, absolutely massive, from where we were 3 weeks ago to right now. Just to how much this team has changed. And if it's dodgeball, great. If it's Bob Huggins, great. I don't care who or how the Bearcats are doing this. The fact of the matter is that they are. And if they score 80 points down the stretch, the remaining, 7 games, then yeah, they're a tournament team. And I love where we're at. I just don't think that's going to be realistic.
Obviously, them being on the bubble is not the best from where you expect them to be preseason. We thought this was going to be a really great season for UC, but where you were, 3-4 weeks ago, this has to feel like a huge win. How much are, you specifically, but UC fans as a whole, taking the fact that you are going to be able to fight in late February, early March, play the Big 12 tournament with something on the line? How much of a win are you taking that as opposed to this season still being viewed as an overall letdown? Or is it just where do we end up?
No, I think there are a lot of fans that are where we end up, and they want to make the tournament no matter what. I'm at the point where
you're getting 4 weeks of exciting basketball you didn't expect.
Correct. Like every game right now is a tournament game.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. And the fact that we have meaningful basketball right now and on February 12th, when at January 12th or January, the middle of January we'll call it.
Right.
That it was dead. So I'm extremely happy, and if you have a chance, the Bearcats to have a chance to control your own destiny is everything.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited. I do take it as a win. my Wes Miller gripes have gone down. Funny how that works when the team wins a couple games, but
yeah, I know how that goes.
Listen. I like Wes. I like him as a human. I should say I like him as a human. I wish that we didn't start out so poorly in this conference because you had such an opportunity to make the tournament. Because again, you don't have to be the world's best team. You got to go 500 in conference play. That's all anybody's ever asked, and it's looking like they won't do that. But that's all anybody ever wanted. So good for Wes Miller to get these guys ready to roll. Good for Bob Huggins. Good for Dodgeball. I don't care. The fact of the matter is that they're here, they're competing, and we're playing meaningful basketball on Saturday once again. Every game's a must-win, so win the game or at least compete for it, and we'll see where we are.
I really like that story that he shared about. For one, we knew the dodgeball thing, and by the way, when they were losing all those games in a row and then the headline comes out that, they spent their practice playing dodgeball, I was like, oh, man, that's kind of goofy. That's kind of silly. That's not a good look, right? But it actually might have been the coolest thing that Wes Miller could have done because a lot of times, a lot of this stuff isn't talent related. It's mental related. And I think it was a mental reset for the team, especially when Scott Springer, who just came on with the Inquirer talking Bearcats a little bit ago, brought up the fact that, all the players thought that, man, this is going to be, we're probably going to run us into the ground. It's going to be like a punishment for just how poor we've been as of late. And then they get down there thinking the worst, and it ends up just being like oh, okay, this is a relaxing thing. Like, let's just put the past behind us and let's focus on who we are now. So, and it too, when you get to the NCAA tournament, they're always looking for those feature pieces, those, what was that turning point of the season? Dodgeball, if Cincinnati gets to the NCAA tournament, will be a part of their feature story. It will. So people can mock it, but it is a part of the turnaround, whether you want to admit it or not. So in a positive way.
Scott said that he had that story ready to go if he wanted to the night before.
Yeah.
And by the way, and we were talking about, I think Reed and Jacob and Casey, we were all talking about it after the show one day last week, and it was like, if that story drops and they lose that game, it's the worst story that's ever been written ever. And I think I'd be protesting outside of Fifth Third
That might
Arena.
be enough to get him fired.
Yeah, honest to God, it probably would have been. I don't know. It's just because you can't excuse that. A team that's not good at basketball, not practicing basketball. Well, we know why. Like it would just be inexcusable. So good for Wes to fire the guys up in a different way. Everybody's played sports in here, and there's always a moment during a season. Obviously, I never played that high level of sports, but there's always a moment during the course of a season where your coach is just really pissed off at you, and you're still trying to play, but you keep losing and losing and losing, and it's like something has to give, and every once in a while the coach can decide to make you run wind sprints until you all puke. Or he goes the other route, and it's like when I was on the tennis team, we'd play tennis baseball. We lose a couple, and we're like, all right, you guys aren't playing good. We're just going to have some fun, and then we'll do some sprints.
All right, off the bench, right here on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton, Justin Kinner. Casey McAllister producing the show today. Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, off and rolling here on a Wednesday. Let's talk a little Cincinnati Reds when we come back. MLB's Top 100, obviously is being released right now, and Elly De La Cruz pops up on this list. No surprise there, but how much of an improvement did he make on this ranking from last year to this year? We'll discuss that. Plus, we did say yesterday, sometimes the only headline, like, why do we get excited about pitchers and catchers reporting? Like, who cares? We're still 43 days away from opening day. That's a long time. I said, unfortunately, the only headlines that do come out of spring training, or at least early on in camp, are injury related. A couple things came out yesterday that have some people a little concerned. Should they be? We'll discuss that when we come back. This is Off the Bench. We'll have more next. On the radio side, this would be hour number 2 of Off the Bench right here on 1410 ESPN Radio, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, off and rolling here on a Wednesday. Of course, we talked about the Bearcats in that opening hour. Shout out to Scott Springer giving us some time out of the Inquirer. But now we're going to talk a little Cincinnati Reds. The MLB Top 100 has been released, kind of like similar to what the NFL does right before their season starts. And Elly De La Cruz, no surprise, pops up in this top 100 ranking and had a very nice jump in these rankings as he has jumped up 69 spots from last year's ranking to now. Obviously, we'll take a look at the, at where he falls within this. Again, 40 to 31, those rankings come out. There you see Elly De La Cruz coming all the way in at number 31. This is a little friendlier of a, ranking for him. We had another top 100 about a month or two ago that, had him a little further down than we'd anticipated. But this is about right. Elly De La Cruz, number 31 on this list. Do you have a problem with it from what we've seen of the players currently on it thus far?
I don't hate it. I think it's certainly respect. I mean, going up 69 spots from year to year is certainly a massive jump, but I think a lot of the guys on that list should be a little higher. I think Elly De La Cruz and Corbin Carroll, I'd be hard-pressed to find 30 players better than either of them. So I think 31 is a little bit low, but I won't fight it too hard. I know he struggled on some of the counting numbers last year. Obviously, strikeouts and errors we've talked about a ton on this show, and then that probably kept him down outside of the top 20 or so. I would wager pretty comfortably that this is the last year of Elly De La Cruz's career he's outside the top 20, outside the top 10.
I'm going to be hesitant because he's so young. Like, these rankings mean nothing to me. And like, if he was ranked like 100th, I'd have an issue. Yeah. Like, being ranked 30th isn't a bad thing when you're a kid. So
they're giving him respect.
They're giving him respect. That's all I can ask. Should he be higher? In my opinion, yeah. But at the end of the day, let's see what the Bearcats. I talked to Bearcats for 35 minutes. Let's see what the Reds do this year. And if he has another season that adds on to an already incredible career, then yeah, I'm going to say he should keep getting higher. I think he's a top 10 player in baseball. He's on the cover of the show. I'm not saying that means a ton. But usually when you're a cover of a video game, you've done something right in your career, and at least you're, if nothing else, a very exciting, loved player, and that's certainly what Elly De La Cruz is. And yeah, so like, should he be higher? Absolutely, but I don't care. I mean, Elly De La Cruz is awesome. Everybody knows that. Next year he's going to be higher. What were the Bengals ranked this year? Weren't they all low too?
Burrow was in the 40s, or Jamar was in the 40s. One of them was about 44, 45, and they were ranked very, very low as well.
Nonsense. These rankings suck.
Well, is this one? How are these calculated, Jake? Is it like the NFL? It's all the players that are voting on that. Is that the same here for MLB's top 100?
I believe this is MLB Network. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe this is MLB Network and their analysts that do this, and they're very clear that it is the top 100 right now, as in today. So forecasting and all the past and everything like that does come into play, but they're ranking the players right now. It's not about last season. It's not about next season. So I think that, gives them a lot of outs in terms of where they put certain players when you can just talk about, preferences at this very day without using, a lot else to go into your rankings. But yeah, I think my understanding of this is that it was the MLB Network analysts that voted on this. And and I was appreciative that Elly jumped as far as he did. I was thinking he was going to come out in like the 80s or something and then be massively disrespected, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and look, he comes in at number 31. Who could the 30 players be that are better? Well, to be fair, they needed to rank everyone else because I think spots 1 through 30, I think they're just dropping the whole Dodgers roster, correct? Like, is that how this is going to look? I know Blake Snell was actually a couple picks behind Elly, but yeah, I'm sure a lot of Dodgers will be represented in this. Yeah, that's the afterthought. That's why he's ranked in the third,
Don't even talk about Blake Snell.
Staying with the Reds right now again. So obviously we talked yesterday, pitchers and catchers are reporting, and it sounds exciting, and we were excited about it. But I think, Elliot, one of you had said, what's the big deal about these guys reporting? Obviously, we're still 44 days away, now 43 days away from opening day, of course. But I said the only headlines that really come out of this time at this point are usually negative ones. It's usually regarding an update on someone's health, and a lot of times it's not always positive. We got that a little bit yesterday, of course. Rhett Lauder, we did hear about the fact that they're going to slow down his throwing program as he is already, after one day, after pitchers and catchers have reported, starting to feel a little soreness in his elbow. How concerned are you right away, especially when you hear a pitcher that was as good as he was? We talked about whether he would even be on the opening day, rotation or not, or, start out in Louisville. How do we feel? Soreness already in that throwing elbow. How much of a concern is that for you as we sit here in February?
Yeah, I hate it. I mean, it makes me sick. And I know it's probably not a big deal, and you just overreact to every little injury. But this is the stuff that we're talking about. Like, if you're not going to be healthy, there's no value. I love Nick Lodolo. Love him. Saw him wearing a brace the other day. I don't know if that meant anything, but that's what, I think the Reds, this season, it's going to be a massive test to see if they're going to be able to stay healthy. A massive test. And I don't know if they've got the answers for it, if I'm going to be honest with you. I hope they do. And I know I see people in the chat are yelling at the training staff. It's a training staff. It's a training staff. Training staff's not out there breaking legs and breaking arms and doing whatever the hell that you think they're doing. These guys got to be healthy, and they got to be ready to play baseball. If we're taking it slow, I understand it. If we don't want to get them hurt, so we're taking all the precautions in the world, I understand it. But when opening day comes around, I got to have the same roster that we all think that we have right now on that day. You have to, or else this team's not going to win games. That's a fact. You can bring in Terry Francona. You can bring in Jesus Christ himself. He can't manage the team if the team isn't healthy enough to play baseball games. That's just the fact of the matter. And I want them to be healthy. So, yeah, every little incident like this, I'm going to be very, very concerned. To their credit, though, I think Terry said that CES is coming in the best shape of his life.
There we go.
So we got CES in good shape. We just got to get everybody else in great shape. We're going to play baseball. I don't know, though, Jacob, and I'm not a fan of another team. I don't follow the beat reporters of other teams. Do other teams deal with this, too? Like, they come into camp and all their players are hurt right away?
I don't know about right away. It certainly caught me off guard to see these injuries. Spencer Steer's lingering since last season. Yeah, no, really, definitely shocking. And I'm scarred from last year with how spring training ravaged the entire season. So definitely didn't take that well. Everyone who's a lot smarter than me when it comes to baseball says don't worry about injuries in February. So I'm not going to worry about injuries in February. If these guys are still, missing time when we get down, deeper into March and nearing opening day, that's when I'm going to be concerned. But at least for right now, I'm not pressing the panic button on these injuries. I think it's probably just taking precautions. I wish we didn't have to take them. But I'm going to choose not to flip my lid quite yet on these injuries. I mean, we've debated for months now about whether this Reds team has made enough additions if everyone is healthy to compete for the playoffs. What if we lose some of our guys that we're planning on relying on? Certainly wouldn't be a good summer in that case. So, yeah, I think that's more just optimism than anything else. But I'm not going to freak out about these just yet.
Injuries are always going to be a part of the game, and I think the difference, I know, Elliot, you asked about other teams. If you think about the teams that spend a lot of money, I think that, the fact that the Dodgers lose Shohei Ohtani for a little bit of a chunk last year, and there was just no fear or concern because they just have so many other stars to carry the load. The problem with the Reds is now that they're starting to get a roster that's very respectable and that has put us in position to be a little bit optimistic and excited about what they can do. The problem is they have such a small margin for error when it comes to the health of this ball club. When a guy goes down, they don't have a lot of options. Now, on the positive side, the positive look to this, Rhett Lauder, and by the way, he has not been listed as out. They're just limiting his throwing program as we get spring training started. So, but again, you just don't like hearing that the elbow, that's the scary part of the arm, I guess shoulder, anything with the arm is obviously a concern. So I think it's something to keep an eye on. But I will say, let's say it does develop into something more. If you look at the Brady Singer move, and you look at the Nick Martinez move of them matching, obviously, the qualifying offer, I think that those are going to be two underrated moves if the Reds lose any major starter heading into the season throughout spring training. The problem is they can't handle more than one major loss to an arm. We were debating a while back, and I think we all kind of agreed. I don't think Rhett Lauder was going to be in the rotation on opening day to begin with, if it went, with that being said. But now a small margin for error when it comes to health becomes even smaller if Rhett Lauder ends up, if this ends up being something more than what they're saying right now. So we'll see. Still, again, first day of pitchers and catchers reporting, and that's one of the updates that we get. But I would be more concerned if it was a Hunter Green or a Nick Lodolo, newly acquired Brady Singer. Obviously, you look at Andrew Abbott, Nick Martinez. Those are the guys we're going to have to rely on, hopefully on opening day and moving forward. Rhett Lauder will keep an eye on that situation. Now, you brought up Spencer Steer. Jacob, Gordon Whitmire, everyone's favorite Reds reporter, tweeted out yesterday on X that Reds outfielder Spencer Steer is still recovering from shoulder soreness that he dealt with late last season and likely will DH as spring training games start up, eventually working up to getting on the field. Now, that may just sound like an update on a guy heading into camp. Some have questioned the intent of what this message was supposed to be. When you see that, though, you start thinking about Spencer Steer, and you're like, oh, yeah, he was a little banged up to close out the year last year. So that's another name to keep an eye on. When you saw that X message, when you saw that tweet, what was your reaction with Spencer Steer as we currently sit here in mid-February?
This is a guy that has played as many games as you could possibly ask him to play the past several years. Yeah. Losing him, and this is where I have serious concerns or serious problems with people criticizing Spencer Steer. The number one thing that him and Elly De La Cruz are the best at is staying available and staying on the field. If you lose Spencer Steer, you're going to be losing a significant part of this offense. And I don't want to you're losing 90 RBIs if that guy doesn't play. So I know he's not the world's best defender, but he gives you 150 games every single season, at least. If you don't have Spencer Steer, if I'm going to be honest, I don't know what this team is.
Spencer Steer being available is why he's valuable. If he's not playing 120, 130 games a year, then he's not good enough to be your everyday outfielder. The biggest thing for him is that he's available, that he's consistent. So this is a bad spot to be in if it's lingering this long. I mean, I said I wasn't worried about the injuries, but if Spencer Steer has a lingering injury, that changes completely who he is as a player. So I'm worried about that one a little bit more than the others. But again, mid-February, late February, we can wait a little bit before we completely freak out about these things.
It changes the entirety of that outfield, too.
Correct.
And whether or not, again, you want to say Spencer Steer's a bad outfielder, that's fine, but we're going to have two guys probably in the outfield that don't play in the outfield.
An average outfielder that can play 130 games is a completely different story than an average outfielder that plays 75 games.
Correct. Gavin Lux. I love Gavin Lux, but Gavin Lux has not played a lot of games in the outfield. In that limited sample size, I think he's like 0.2 off of whatever the defensive metric is that everybody uses. And when it comes to defensive WAR or whatever it is, outs above average, I think outs above average, he's got like a minus 2.2, and Spencer Steer's got, or Gavin Lux is a minus 2. So it's like you're not really improving anything there if that's the case. I like Gavin Lux, but again, not an outfielder that you're asking to go play in left field. At least Spencer Steer has played there.
Another bullpen that we're going to talk about, a familiar face for at least Francona. We'll talk about the impact, and there are a ton of names fighting for a spot or two remaining in this bullpen. We'll talk about that. Plus, Terry Francona, and maybe you mentioned this a little bit ago, I can't remember, but Terry Francona mentioned how impressed he was with the status and health of course, Christian Encarnacion-Strand, and also has an idea of a different way to utilize him this upcoming season. We'll get to that as we talk more Reds when we come back. All right, we are back off the bench. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and Casey McCollister with you here on a Wednesday. Let's pick up talking a little bit more Reds here. Terry Francona apparently has said that Christian Encarnacion-Strand has come into camp in such great shape and that he'd like to see him potentially play at third base coming up this spring training. Nick Kirby tweeted yesterday as well that, Christian Encarnacion Strand being able to play third base would make the Reds roster significantly better. I know we said earlier only negative notes seem to come out and reports and updates of camp early on, but hearing things like this of him coming into camp, really, in shape and ready to go is huge. Waiting to hear stuff on Matt McClain and some others, but that's a positive sign about Christian Encarnacion Strand, who was banged up with injuries pretty much all of last season. Him coming into camp and in shape, and then of course the prospect of him possibly playing at third. How do we feel about this update as camp's underway?
Feel great. You need CES. Again, this whole roster is dependent upon them being there and being healthy. So CES is a guy, played terribly last year, though at the result of the injury. I mean, he was injured for that first month. He was terrible in that first month. If CES is healthy, if he's the guy we saw in the minors, then yeah, this is a guy that's going to be a significant contributor for the Reds this year. And especially, you need a right-handed bat. CES is that power right-handed bat that we're all talking about. If he's able to be there, be healthy, be at first base this year, or potentially be at third base, I guess, depending on how healthy he is, then yeah, I'm going to feel really, really good about this Reds team. And he's one of the, I would say, 3 X factors offensively that I have circled, where if he's good, there is a very, very solid chance the Reds are going to be fighting for a playoff spot.
Is CES to third strictly a positive CES thing, or is it a continued negative Noelvi Marte thing?
It's more of a CES thing, but I will say this: the Noelvi Marte.
He's still not there.
The Noelvi Marte story is so tired to me, and it's unfortunate because when he came up, he was my guy. That was my favorite player heading into last season.
That was unbelievable.
That was the guy I had being our best player. Like I love Noelvi Marte. The drastic fall from grace that he has had over this last year and a half has been honestly historic. So I don't know where he's at. And to be quite honest, Noelvi Marte is not even in my brain when I'm thinking about the 2025 Reds. We brought on Tommy Thrall. I don't know how many months ago that was, a month ago. And Tommy came out and said that, I like Noelvi Marte. And Noelvi Marte has a chance to be a significant contributor for the Reds in 2025. I don't know. I don't know if I can trust Noelvi Marte at this point. I certainly wouldn't trust him over any one player we have on this roster right now. So I think that CES playing third, fine by me. Have Jameer play first. I don't care who plays first. Just have somebody in there that can at least be serviceable defensively, because that was the issue with Jameer at third last year. Not a great defender either.
Right.
So CES, I think he's a better defender than Jameer, so put him at third. Fine by me.
I feel like Jermaine Burton is like mentoring Noelvi Marte at this point.
I guess so, yeah.
I think they're at the casino right now, actually, as we speak. But one more Reds headline. Again, we touched on this briefly because it came out when in the middle of the show yesterday. But the Reds did sign right-handed pitcher again Scott Barlow to a 1-year deal worth about $2.5 million, according to ESPN's Jesse Rogers. Barlow had a 4.25 ERA in 63 appearances last season, and when he was with the Guardians, he also has a 3.49 ERA in 365 games. And a lot of fans seem to be pleased with this extra depth piece being added to the bullpen. There are a lot of names that have been invited to camp. I know that Chatterbox had shared the graphic on their X account yesterday. We'll take a look. Guys, that's a lot of names. And you look at the bullpen locks and you just look at the options they have right there. It's a great balance of a lot of righties and lefties, obviously. It looks like there could be one more spot that they have to fill, assuming that Tony Santillan, Sam Moll, Pagan, Rogers, Diaz, Barlow, and Suter are the guys. That's a lot of names on the right to pick from. Graham Ashcraft, we talked about yesterday. Is Graham Ashcraft the favorite out of all of those names there to land that possible spot? I know, Elliott's guy, Ian Jabot, another favorite right there as well.
I think that you would ride the hot hand with that spot. If Graham Ashcraft plays or pitches phenomenally out of the bullpen, it's going to be Graham Ashcraft's spot for this entire year. Would not shock me if a couple of those guys were to get in that spot at some point.
We're going to see a lot of those names.
I was going to say, it just health. One of these pitchers is going to go down. So
I also think the top 3 on the right there, Ashcraft, Spires, Phillips, are all 3 legitimately good options for that role that we're talking about Ashcraft filling. The multi-inning guy, the thing that Nick Martinez did last year, all 3 of those guys, ex-starters. Spires came up last year and gave us some pretty good, significant innings in a period of time. Obviously, Phillips fell off since what we used to think of him as a prospect last season, but still an encouraging young player. We saw Yasser Zulueta have some good stuff last year. Zach Maxwell is a prospect we've talked about a lot on Chatterbox programming, and someone that we're a lot of us are really excited about. Obviously, Jabot. I think there's a lot of names over there that are going to be rotating through that spot, and I don't even know if it's just that spot. I think a lot of this bullpen could potentially be turned over relatively consistently with just injuries and innings and workload. And I think the Reds are, at least right now, with everyone healthy, in a pretty good spot bullpen-wise. I don't know if they have the stars that you would necessarily be looking for, but they have a lot of serviceable arms. They don't have a lot of pieces that I think we're going to see this year that we don't think are MLB caliber pitchers. And I think that's a pretty big change from what we've seen over the last couple of years, scraping the bottom of the barrel in the minor leagues. There's a lot of guys on that list that are MLB caliber pitchers at the very least. I would say the vast majority of the names on those lists, we wouldn't really, turn our nose up at seeing them in an MLB game. So I think that's a really, really good point to take away here from where this bullpen's at now, is we're going to see guys that we at least have a relative level of faith in.
I trust this bullpen. A couple weeks ago, I didn't trust the bullpen. I trust this bullpen right now. So, if especially towards the back end, like if you get a good 8th, 9th inning guy, and I really do think that's what Taylor Rogers and Diaz will be this season. If you have that, the rest of the stuff is just, I know Nick Martinez is probably going to be a starter for a majority of the season, but if you can get even a little bit of what Nick Martinez was consistency-wise out of this bullpen, this is going to be a good team, man. And obviously the starting pitching is going to have to go a little, they can't be like 4-inning guys and getting shelled, right? That was always the concern with Hunter Green. He'd throw 400 pitches in 2 innings and get pulled. I think he developed out of that. I think all of our pitchers right now are solid. Graham Ashcraft was the one guy that couldn't go 6 innings. Now you have him in the bullpen role. Maybe if he makes the cut, I love our chances. I do. As of this second, on February 12th, I love the Cincinnati Reds heading into 2025. I really do.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting, we talk so much about Francona's addition, and it just seems like every media hit that he does, he really emphasizes the bullpen, the bullpen, the bullpen. Brady Singer was a big addition. Nick Martinez, most likely a starter, right? Like that was a big move that the Reds made to be able to keep him in Cincinnati. But it just seems like almost all the media hits and all the conversations you hear from Terry Francona, it just seems like the biggest emphasis for him is the usage of the bullpen. And you could tell that that's been the biggest point. I think you brought it up yesterday, Elliot, when you said, obviously Francona is probably getting a bit of a say in how this roster is being constructed. And I think while we were waiting for that big name outfielder, we got an Austin Hayes, which is not a bad option, but not the big name and power bat we were looking for. It seems like all the money that has been spent as of late has really been all on these bullpen arms. When you look at Rogers and some of the others that they've added, this is $2.5 million. I know that's not a lot. This isn't Dodger money, but that's actually a bigger contract with the addition of Barlow than I was anticipating them making at this point with pitchers and catchers reporting. So I like that move. I think it kind of speaks to what you said yesterday. I think that this is Terry Francona's influence on the front office saying, hey, any money we spend now, get us arms. Just continue to strengthen that bullpen, because if the rotation's shaky, the only way to get through that is to have strong arms behind them. And I think that so far, like you said, I feel pretty good about it heading into camp.
Yeah, I think pitching's the strength of this team. I think the starting rotation is really, really good if we get these guys to continue on the trajectory that they're on, especially, Hunter Green, Lodolo, if he can stay healthy, Abbott, if he can stay healthy. I think the starting rotation could be one of the best in baseball maybe for a couple of years. And then we just talked about the bullpen. This could be a real strength for this team. And then, if you're holding other teams down, 1, 2, 3 runs, the offensive worries don't come into play nearly as often. So that's going to be a huge, huge thing for the Reds this year, is to have consistent pitching, to take a lot of the pressure off these young guys that do inevitably have to take a step up if we want to make the playoffs, go on a run or anything this year. But you could take some of that pressure off, especially earlier in the season, if the pitching is as good as we expect it to be.
Yeah.
All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton. Let's turn our attention towards the NFL. We'll focus on the AFC North and your Bengals when we come back. The AFC North is going to be a very interesting division this offseason, obviously. The most fascinating thing about the AFC North to me is the coaching there, because, again, Zach Taylor's back, Stefanski's back, obviously Harbaugh, back. And then, of course, you look at the Steelers with what they have right there, too, just that constant that you have there. I think that's one of the more fascinating things about this division, but all these teams have a ton of question marks heading into the offseason. Let's talk about the biggest headlines for each team, or question marks for each team in the AFC North, when we come back. A month. We're back. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. I guess now it's officially the off season. I think talk about Radio Row. I feel like there was so much off-season talk on Radio Row. The Radio Row was supposed to be used to build up the Super Bowl, and it was just all about, obviously, Myles Garrett, all about the Cincinnati Bengals, Aaron Rodgers, all this. Well, now it's officially the off-season. Now we're going to turn our attention towards the draft, of course, and we're going to be talking a ton of the off-season moving forward. But you look at the AFC North, and we're going to go through each team right now. The biggest question mark that we each have for each team in the AFC North as we approach the offseason. Let's start with, of course, the Baltimore Ravens. I find them to be the least interesting of all the teams in the AFC North right now. I think the big question mark could be, are they going to bring Derrick Henry back? Obviously, you watch what the Eagles just did. Of course, Saquon Barkley really, capping off the talent with the star running back like that. Derrick Henry was phenomenal for the Ravens this past season. It seemed when he hurt the Ravens, it was not him. It was the lack of usage at key moments throughout that had people scratching their head. But when you're the Ravens, what do you think the biggest question mark for them is? Is this going to be kind of a quiet, boring offseason for the Ravens? What question marks do you have for this organization and Lamar Jackson at this point?
I think if you're Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta and everyone else in the Ravens front office, you're kind of sitting around this season after you lose to the Bills, and you're saying, what do we do?
Yeah.
Last year we lost to the Chiefs. We didn't have a good enough run game. We went out and grabbed Derrick Henry. 2 years ago, you lost. You didn't have a good enough passing game. You drafted Zay Flowers in the first round. The offensive line struggles. You invest a first-round pick in Tyler Linderbaum. Your defense struggled at the start of this year, turned into a top 10 defense for the last 8 to 10 weeks of the season and into the playoffs. What more can you do? I think with a lot of the other teams that are falling short of the Super Bowl with elite quarterbacks, you can point to various holes in the roster that they need to improve. And I'm not necessarily saying that there aren't holes in the Ravens roster. I think the one everyone's kind of talking about is the number one wide receiver. I think they would go there. But I think over the last few years, if you ask them at the start of the seasons, they would have thought they addressed that issue already. So I think the Ravens are in a very, very tough spot right now where you have one of the best rosters in all of football and have for a couple of years now, and you have not been able to get over the hump and get to that mountaintop. And I don't know what else you have left. We all thought that the addition to Derrick Henry was exactly what they needed. They forgot to run the ball, and then they added the best running back in football, and it didn't work. It wasn't enough. So I think the Ravens are the most confused team this offseason when you talk about a front office perspective, because I really don't know what they do.
The only thing I would say is just another pass-catching option, but I don't know what that – to Jacob's point, I don't know if that propels them into a Super Bowl contending team. The Ravens are solid. They're a good regular season team. You don't want to play the Baltimore Ravens. But when you get to the postseason, do you think the Ravens are good enough to win a Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't know if I do. I don't know if I do after this year. So they're going to need a kicker. They're going to need a new kicker next year.
Yeah.
So they'll probably have to work on that. But outside of that, I mean, the roster is pretty much set. They've got a top serviceable tight end in Mark Andrews. They've got a number one wide receiver in Zay Flowers. They've got one of the best running backs in the league. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Their defense is solid. They've got some of the best secondary players out there. Like I think the Ravens are good. It's just, can we win? Can we win in the postseason? Can we win when it matters? And that's up to the coaching staff. That's up to the players they've got. So we'll see next year. But they're going to win 10, 11 games next year, no doubt about it. It's just, can they win in the postseason?
Yeah, I find them, like I said, boring. I don't know. I mean, there's question marks, but I don't think none of their question marks will be leading SportsCenter or any of the ESPN or national shows across other sports networks.
I saw them linked to Deebo Samuel after his trade request from San Francisco, so that would certainly be up there.
And, I mean, they are like the Steelers. They're interested.
They are linked to number one wide receivers a lot. I do think Deebo uniquely in Baltimore would work like he works in San Francisco. I think he's a player that's very confined to certain systems, but with how great he is as a blocker, how compact his body is, and how he can work in that short yardage game, I think he would work well in Baltimore with their run-first offense. But I think him on the market is an interesting point as well, because I don't really know what you give him, because you have to use him in such a – because you have to use him in such a specific way.
Yeah.
Imagine him in that with Baltimore, too. Like, you have a bruiser of a running back, and then you'd have a bruiser of a wide receiver. That would add an extra element of toughness to him. So that would be a decent fit.
I said it last year about Derrick Henry. Turned out to be right. I said the same thing about Deebo Samuel. He would look really cool in the Ravens uniform. Dark visor, shooting sleeve, all black. He would look really cool. And that means a lot to me when looking at free agency and trade acquisitions. If you're going to look good in the new uniform, you're usually going to be an all right player.
Let's move over to Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a ton of question marks. It doesn't sound like Russell Wilson's going to be brought back. Everyone assumes that Justin Fields, that they'll work out a deal there. But, of course, the Vegas odds right now have them as the favorite landing spot for Aaron Rodgers. So the big question mark for them, obviously, quarterback. I think Mike Tomlin, they put that to bed very early that there's no way they're moving on from Mike Tomlin despite the continued just running in place, success, but not stacking success and having playoff success, of course, a continued problem for Pittsburgh moving forward. But what are the biggest question marks you have there? Because this is a team that they do just enough to be able to win their 9-10 games every season, but they never make that big move that's going to take them over the top. Aaron Rodgers, Pittsburgh, is that the biggest question mark for you for Pittsburgh? What do you have for them heading into the offseason?
It's the QB position. There's no doubt about that. We've talked about their roster a lot over the last few years and how it seems to be more or less ready to go. The defense certainly very good. George Pickens has shown flashes of being an elite receiver in the league. Najee Harris, I know he's a pending free agent, but he was taken in the first round. He was a promising young back when he came out of college, and they just haven't been able to get the quarterback right. And I think if they go with Rodgers, or if something changes and they end up bringing back Russ, or even if they extend Justin Fields, I think that just tells us we're in for another of the same old Steelers season. I think the only reason I would be shocked with the Steelers move this offseason is if they sign someone to be really bad and tank and try to have a good draft pick to get a quarterback, or if they made a big move and went out and got someone who could legitimately win them some playoff games. But I don't expect either of those to happen. I think the Steelers are going to go with something comfortable. Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields. And we're going to have the same thing next year where they're 9-1 through the first 10 weeks, end up 10-7, losing the first round.
7th fewest receiving yards in the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers had last year. I think George Pickens, unfortunately, is a cancer to that team. They're going to need to find another wide receiver eventually when that inevitably doesn't work. Obviously, the quarterback is the number one issue. You already mentioned that, so I'm going to go receiver. I think they need receivers. They need better talent there, and if their offense, because we know what they've got defensively, and what they've got defensively and their special teams unit, they're both phenomenal. It all comes down to that offense. I don't particularly think that Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are the best running backs in the world either.
No.
I just don't think that's the story. I think the story is been and will always be the pass game until they can figure something out. It's been that way since the last 2 years of Big Ben, I think. And right now they need help.
Aaron Rodgers to Pittsburgh seems like it makes a lot of sense. A name to keep an eye out for Pittsburgh because they're always in the wide receiver market. If T. Higgins does leave Cincinnati, I would not be surprised at all to see Pittsburgh make an aggressive move to go after T. Higgins to pair with Aaron Rodgers.
That would hurt.
And Higgins in Pittsburgh. Yes.
Boy,
and,
that would hurt.
We said Baltimore earlier, too, in need of a receiver. A lot of times the AFC North loves to recycle players. It would not, what's the likelihood that T stays in the AFC North if he leaves Cincinnati? That's a question we can get to in a bit. But, man, I could see Pittsburgh's always in the market for a wide receiver. Maybe this is the one that they actually pull the trigger on either way. All right, moving on. We'll go to Cleveland. I don't think they have any question marks, right? Like, that's a Super Bowl contender. They are the most buttoned-up roster in football. What question marks do we have in Cleveland? The floor is your guy. Yeah,
LOL. Yeah, I think there's a question mark at literally every single position. So good luck to the Cleveland Browns. In all seriousness, this is what you need. Deshaun Watson is irrelevant. Unfortunately, it is a little bit relevant, the fact that you have to deal with that money. But it's irrelevant in the fact that you don't have to worry about whether or not that guy is a Cleveland Brown going forward. He stinks. He's not going to play any more football there. You have a set path. You're at the bottom right now, but you're going to climb out of it. You're going to get draft capital. You're going to work your way through this tanking process. Whether or not you draft a quarterback first, whether or not you draft whoever first, this is the beginning of the rebuild. So in a way, I think it would be a little bit calming, the fact that there's no more questions. I don't have to worry about anything else. I know losing Myles Garrett would be tough. I don't think they're even going to lose Myles Garrett realistically. So you have a 2-year rebuild ahead of you, maybe less, I guess. Theoretically, if you get this year figured out, maybe the next year they'd be good. I think it's about 2 years before the Cleveland Browns will be good again, and then you'll just reset it all. So you have to get a new running back. You have to get better wide receiving. You have to get a quarterback. You have to get pretty much everything. So that's what the Cleveland Browns have ahead of them, and it's a long path, but at least right now you know that there is the path that you're on.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for the Browns at this point, at least for me going into this offseason, is what do you do at 2? And if your plan is to take Shedeur Sanders, does he come? You had a combine interview with Shedeur Sanders. You had a top 30 interview with Shedeur Sanders just earlier this week. The Browns are certainly doing their due diligence in the quarterbacks at the top of this class. Do they go that route? Obviously, we don't know yet. The draft is still a few months away. A lot can change. If they do want to draft Shedeur Sanders, will Deion let it happen? I think that's my biggest question going into this offseason because I think the Titans are going to take Cam Ward. I know there's a lot of smoke that they're not going to go quarterback at 1. I just can't see that happening with Brian Callahan as a young head coach there. I think he wants to keep that job, and not going quarterback makes that seat pretty hot, which leaves Shedeur Sanders right there on a platter for Cleveland at 2. And I'm not saying Deion's going to say no, but if Deion says no to anyone, I would think it's Cleveland. So I think that could drastically change their offseason, maybe for a positive. If Shedeur says no and the Browns say, okay, we're trading out of here and you get a lot of draft capital for it, shoot, that might be a positive because I don't think Shedeur is very good anyway. So I don't know if it's all negatives, but that's the Browns storyline I'm watching the most. Obviously, Myles Garrett trade, obviously how that could affect the other star players on that defense, Denzel Ward, JOK, a lot of other guys that could make contenders, better contenders. But I think what they do at number 2 really sets the trajectory for where they go from here. If you go a rookie contract, it speeds that process up quite a bit. Or a rookie quarterback, it speeds that rebuild process up quite a bit, as opposed to just punting on this season and taking an Abdul Carter or a Mason Graham or something along those lines.
If I were Cleveland, I would want Deion to turn it down. Make our decision for us.
That's almost where I'm at. But I'd want to get out of 2 before that gets public. Because once Deion says Shedeur's not coming to Cleveland, you lose probably 1 or 2 mid-round picks in that trade. So if I'm Cleveland and I like Shedeur Sanders and I'm getting the vibe that he could even potentially, 20% chance that he says no, I'm starting to field calls for Shedeur Sanders at 2, Raiders and a lot of the other teams, Saints, that could potentially need quarterbacks.
So it's come out too, and you already talked about Shedeur meeting with he has 30 meetings. His first team he's meeting with is Cleveland. He's going to meet. Deion has spoken with the Browns too. So if you read the tea leaves, if he's spoken with Deion, Deion, not saying gave the green light, but obviously hasn't put up a roadblock. The fact that Shedeur is not even interviewing with the Titans and is going right to the Browns at 2 means maybe there's some, willingness to at least have the conversation. Right. I still think that's there. Earlier you said wide receiver. I actually don't think they have they need to add another wide receiver. But I mean, when Jameis took over the offense, Cedric Tillman played for 3 games before being injured and out for the rest of the season. And, he had games of 75 and 2 touchdowns, 81 and a touchdown, and 90 and no touchdowns. And then you look at Jerry Jeudy, who had a 1,200-yard season. I'm not saying it's the best wide receiver tandem in football, but when the offense opened up, those guys started being really, really good. And I don't think that's at the top of their priority list as far as getting that buttoned up. It's not the top. The running back, they need to figure out what they're doing at running back. And then I do think Shedeur is the guy they're going to go with it too at this point. And to your guys' point, if they find out that he is being blocked from going there, the next thing that's going to happen is you got to control the narrative. Don't let that get out there the best you can. Trade out or just start right away putting it out there that Abdul Carter is your guy because you don't know the future with, when it comes to Myles Garrett, nonetheless. But all right, moving on to close it out. Again, the AFC North, the biggest question marks for each team. The Cincinnati Bengals, the biggest question marks you have for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think any of these are going to be a surprise. There's a lot of question marks, but a lot of upside with the potential answer to some of these as well.
It's the superstars. It's always been the superstars. We knew it was going to be the superstars the minute the game kicked off against the Patriots in week 1. This offseason was going to be hell for fans because we were going to have to deal with these storylines that we dealt with last offseason under a magnifying glass because you're out of time. So, yeah, it's the stars. It's Trey Hendrickson. It's T. Higgins. It's Jamar Chase. And I guess I'll put them in a different order than most people. I think Jamar's number 1 on that list of how interested I am to see how they get it done. I think their hands are very much tied with T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson in terms of what they're able to give them. The structures are very much set in stone in terms of how flexible you can be because you waited until they were done. Trey Hendrickson, a little bit in a different boat because he has that extra year on his contract. He is under contract for this year. T. Higgins is a true free agent, so if you let him hit the open market, you're recruiting and negotiating against other teams with much more cap space and less stars that they're playing. So I think they have to get creative with Jamar Chase's deal to set up how they're able to do the others. That's why I think he is the biggest priority this offseason, not to mention he's the youngest Triple Crown winner and best receiver in the NFL. Youngest Triple Crown winner, best receiver in the NFL right now, on trajectory to be one of the best receivers in NFL history. So it's a no-brainer that you get him done, and then I think you figure out what to do with everyone else. People are putting Trey and T ahead of Jamar in terms of the money because Jamar's is easier to mess with because of the 5th-year option. I think you get as creative as possible with Jamar Chase's extension this offseason, and that can make your life easier with the other 2 if you get it right.
All right, well, that wraps it up for us here on the radio side. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and hanging out with us. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. We'll step away. We'll continue on the YouTube side. We're wrapped up on radio, but this has been Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll be right back.
The Rizzler. Oh, we're back?
Yeah, I just.
Oh,
Look at that.
Hey, we were talking about the Rizzler.
We were talking about the Rizzler. We
Man.
get lost in the breaks.
We do.
We get lost in the breaks.
Once we see the little OTB thing, it's like, all right, now what are we doing? We're just having fun. We're just being nonsensical.
Speaking of being nonsensical,
Sure.
coming up in 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
Yeah, 15 probably.
15 minutes, box lunch for all of our wonderful members. That gives you enough time if you're not a member to become a member.
Boxed lunch, that's right. Everybody, thank you very much for tuning in today. Don't have a ton in the post show, but I will say it's so very funny every single time, and I just saw it. You tweeted it. It's so very funny every single time that they say this conference is 82 and 82, or this team is 500 in conference play, or this league is 500 in conference play. I don't know how you got so much.
Shout out Jacob Pickle.
Did he get? So was it Jacob Pickle again?
Well, that's the tweet.
Okay.
His tweet's the one that got Archie.
Yeah.
And then, I assume Carl Ravitch saw from the same place. But yeah, last night, Alabama versus Texas, Carl Ravitch said since January 4th into Tuesday, the SEC is 82 and 82. There's just no dominant group of teams pulling away.
Yeah. I mean, that's just silly.
Yeah, that's dumb.
I mean, that's just real silly. Are we talking golf in here? Hell yeah. I was looking at the chat.
Chat's been talking golf all week. The People's Open.
The People's Open. What tournament is this now?
Waste Management was last week.
What's this week? Genesis?
Is there something already on? Well, it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. I don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, but yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. That's all we got.
All right, folks.
Everybody, have a very pleasant rest of your day. We are going to go to box lunch.